A crowd of people stood and stared. They'd seen his face before. Nobody was really sure he was from the house of Lost. I saw the film today. Oh boy.
Once another exciting episode of Beelzebubs Repertory Theatre. Yes, nice performance. We bring you the classic tale of one young social maverick, if you will, on a quest for acceptance and a struggle against not only the demons of his soul, but also the demons of the sky. Please join us as Beelzebub Repertory Theatre is most proud to present Top Gun. 2,600 out, somewhere over the Indian Ocean.
Good, man, you're looking a little low. Pull up. I can't have, I got 5 kids. Gee, thanks, Madam Goose.
We're the best of the best, right? The best of the best, so they can become the best of the best.
Who's that? That's us. Flash. Don't states. Better watch out.
So, ma'am. Have you figured it out yet?
Figure what out, Ice?
Who's the best pilot?
I don't know about that, but I think we settle this over a quick game of volleyball.
You're on!
If I told you that I love you, maybe think there's something wrong. Not a man, too many faces. Ask how well those who speak know nothing. Find out who their cause. Like those who curse their luck. Too many places. Those who feel wrong. Know that the stains of the swords of the soldier. Know that the gloves are weapons of war. Know that diamonds fight for their swords. That's not the shape of my heart. That's not the shape of my heart. That's not the shape of my heart.
Familiar faces in the audience tonight. Some of you are going, oh yeah, and some of you are like, what the hell is he saying? The truth of the matter is I actually used to go here in 1992 and transferred and went to Tufts, and as irony would have it, here we are. But I just want to say that you guys, it's been a great time. We had an awesome time singing here, and I'm very happy to be back and visiting. And before we go, there is one thing that we need to tell you. And that's about a product that we sell and endorse, and it's our latest album, Drift. And we like it a lot, but yeah. Okay, well, it's like, you know, it looks like a CD, and it is a CD. And it's gray, and it says Drift on it, which is the title, and it's us, and it's got a lot of tracks you just heard tonight. And we like it a lot, but we don't want to keep it, and we want you to have it. So please take them away from us, or money, if you will, and this will be our last tune. Thank you.
Been a long time, somebody know. Matt and I want to get on with this.
Please welcome the Troublemakers from the University of Maryland.
Up to Colgate. Any guesses? 3 days. Almost. 8 hours of troublemakers time. Thank you very much. We have kind of a problem here. We're usually 18 people. And, well, you know, we were caravanning in the road on 83. And, well, the two of the cars just like went driving off and one fell off a cliff and all these things happened. And now we're just like 10. And so, you have to excuse us one moment while we pick our songs up.
I know. Western migration.
I got to go first. Don't let your heart look away from me. Don't let your heart do Don't let your heart do Don't let your heart do look away from me. Yeah, every day, love like I should know. I'll keep on loving you as I grow and think of you each night and each day. I promise you, always stay. And then sometimes, okay, all right. Ling bee, ling bee, ling bee, okay. Ling bee, the color of his eyes is blue, the color of his hair is brown, the color of his cheeks are rosy, colored one with the color of his ling bee.
Hey, Jamie, what was Mozart's favorite fruit?
What was it, Matt?
Banana.
Can't tell jokes, but he sure is cute. We really like to thank you for coming tonight, and last but not least, the Colgate 13.
stage, so please watch your step as you step down.
Parece como Chris Farley, ¿no?
You're not responsible for any of the lost house screws you broken up while on this ride.
Estaba pensando el otro día en una cosa que estaba leyendo en clase de teatro en el segundo. Es que estuvimos leyendo una obra que se llama El alcalde de Talamea.
Pansy Peaches. What the